It is a challenging week. It's the Easter weekend now, as you know. It's a hot weekend. There's a lot going on in London, right across London. And every day we've had over 1,000 officers. In fact, I think it's probably now over 1,500 officers working to police these protests. It's had an impact not just on the police, obviously, but on Londoners in general. Lots of people have had miserable disruption to their lives. And I've got one message for the protesters, and that is, please go to Marble Arch where you can protest lawfully. Stop your unlawful protest. And if you don't want to go to Marble Arch, then go home.
How much sympathy do you have for businesses in the West End who, by the end of all of this, will have lost tens of millions of pounds in revenue?
I think all Londoners will have sympathy for those businesses. Some will be able to cope with the losses better than others, no doubt. But it is clear that by stopping, for example, Oxford Circus and stopping the through route up from Waterloo Bridge, it's affecting business in all kinds of ways, and people are losing money. It's also affecting people who want to get about London, whether that's for work or tourist reasons. It's affecting everybody in the area of the West End. And I've been walking about there today. I can assure you that many people are very fed up. They're coming up to me saying, you know, these protesters don't realise the impact they're having on people like me.
Have you been stung by the criticism with people saying that this should have been dealt with on day one, police should have just gone in and whatever number of arrests just kind of dealt with it because of the impact on the city, commuters, business and the international reputation, people looking in and seeing this day after day? Have you been stung by the criticism?
I'm very proud of what the Met have been doing. I'm very proud of the officers. We're extremely experienced in public order policing. We have fantastically experienced commanders, we have fantastically experienced people on the ground. We are world leaders in public order policing and in protest policing. The guys and girls have been working immensely hard. They have to work within the legal framework, and we have to have a proportionate response. I'm sure people sitting in their armchairs, you know, on one side or other of the equation, may feel I'd have done it differently, but I can assure you they're thinking through all their decisions. The people on the front line are more scrutinised probably than any other profession in the world. They're having every single action filmed and scrutinised, and I think they're doing a fantastic job, and I'm really grateful to them.
What happens in the days to come? We've heard your message to the protesters to go to Marble Arch and protest where they were told to, peacefully and legally. How much longer will this last for?
Well, that's up to the protesters to some extent, isn't it? But we have already arrested over 700 people, I think heading for 750 people. We will continue to arrest people. We will continue to dismantle street furniture, take away things that they put in our way, continue to try to minimise disruption and get the roads moving and allow people to go about their lawful business. And we will continue to do that. We have shown that we are strong, we are determined. I've been a police officer for 36 years. I have never known a single operation in which over 700 people have been arrested. It shows we are determined and we will carry on.
Some reports that you've run out of cells, that you've run out of officers to arrest people because they're not cooperating, the members of the protests, and it's taking 4 officers to carry each person out when they're arrested. Just, can we talk about resources and numbers? Have you run out of cells?
So what many of these protesters are doing, as you will have seen, is either gluing themselves or using very, very sophisticated mechanical contraptions to make it extremely hard for the officers to arrest them. They therefore have to spend quite a long time getting people free, using specialist equipment, specialist officers sometimes, getting the glue unglued, and then the people are refusing to walk, so they are being carried. I think it is frankly amazing, and I'm very proud of the fact that nobody has been injured, as far as I can see, in any of these arrests. But it does take 4 or 5 officers just to get somebody across to the van, and then they have to be transported to our cells. So that's resource intensive. But we have to do our job professionally, and we are doing it professionally. Once we're at the custody suites, of course there's a limited number of cells in London. We have a very good way of managing the flow around the custody suites. We've still got cell space available at the moment. If it comes to the point where we need to use cells in other parts of the country and the surrounding forces, then of course we would. And that's quite normal. Sometimes other forces put people in our cells.
Have you spoken to the Prime Minister about what's been going on?
I am not going to tell you who I have spoken to and who I haven't spoken to, but I can assure you I've spoken to many senior politicians, continue to do so. I've got an open line to both the Mayor and indeed to the Home Secretary. They're taking an interest. What happens, however, in terms of the operations on the ground remain entirely the responsibility of the Metropolitan Police, the British Transport Police, City of London Police and our partners, and we will direct how the protests are policed. The buck stops with me.
The protests haven't ended now, but will you be taking away learning from what's happened over the past few days in terms of this never happening again, London being effectively brought to a standstill?
So I think we should all pause. We always do after any large scale or any small scale for that matter operation. We will pause in the Met and have a good think about whether there's anything we could do differently, what we've learned from this, how we adapt our tactics. We will also be talking to the government and to our colleagues in the criminal justice system to see whether there are changes that should be made in the legal framework to make it easier for us to deal with people who are not violent but are refusing to move when it is unlawful for them to stay there protesting any longer. That is the dilemma, and if our powers are insufficient, if we don't have sufficient deterrence in the criminal justice system, then I will certainly be asking for changes. But I don't think now is the time to go into the detail of that. We obviously need to think about it.
Just looking ahead, next weekend the London Marathon takes place, a huge strain on police resources as well, so many visitors coming in, so many athletes.
Sure.
What happens if these protests are still ongoing and you've got a world-class event in the city taking up all of those resources as well? What's your message to the protesters looking forward to the next week?
Well, my message to the protesters thinking about Sunday, Marathon Sunday, is that I think a very, very large number of people right across the United Kingdom would be furious if the marathon was affected in terms of its safety and security or in any other way by protests like these. Suffice to say, the Metropolitan Police is a huge service. We are continuing to run our business. We're here where you can see the emergency calls are being answered. We're dealing with violent crime in all the boroughs. The officers are working extended hours in order to be able to make that happen. We will continue to adapt and to flex and continue, if we need to, with this operation policing protests. And if we need to ask for help from other forces, as we have done in the last couple of days, we will do so. As I say, I'm very proud of what we've achieved. Heathrow has not been disrupted. Over 700 people have been arrested. The officers have been extraordinarily professional, and we will go on doing that and trying to ensure that disruption to people in general going about their business in London is minimised as far as possible. The easiest way that can happen is if these protesters go to Marble Arch or go home.
So in all your policing experience, you've never known an operation like this? You would never do anything differently over the last few days looking back?
I've said already, I think there will be bound to be things that collectively we, our partners, people in the criminal justice system, and indeed probably politicians, in terms of the legal framework, will want to think about. How can we change? We always do that. You know, if I was running a firearms operation today, at the end of it, the guys and girls will debrief and they'll say, what did we learn from that? How will we do things differently? I'm proud of the professional and proportionate response of my officers. I'm proud by the determination, the resilience and the courage that they're showing in the face of quite a lot of difficulty. I'm proud at how dynamically they're changing their approach when they need to, and the fact that we have nobody who's been injured and 750 people locked up.